Less than 24 hours ago, a new episode was posted of Jada Pinkett-Smith's online series, Red Table Talk. The title is Polyamory for You. In this video, I'm going to share my response to this episode as a polyamorous woman. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Leslie, and I am a full-time life coach based here in Brisbane, Australia, and I have never been so eager to just drop what I'm doing and make a YouTube video. I'm originally from the US, I'm polyamorous, my husband's polyamorous, we each have partners, we each have other partners, and we also have a daughter. So that's the lens through which I watched this episode. This Red Table Talk episode was kind of presented in 3 separate segments, so I'm going to respond to each segment separately for the sake of being organized and so that I don't just go off on a tangent about polyamory. So let's just jump right into the first segment. The most fascinating thing for me about this first part of the talk was that this part of the discussion happened among 3 women from 3 different generations of the same family. Jada Pinkett-Smith, her daughter Willow, and Jada's mother, Adrienne Banfield Norris, who I'm just going to refer to as Gammy, because that's what they called her on the show. That already is a very interesting dynamic for this conversation, because it's one that's rarely, if ever, seen in media relating to polyamory. In fact, if anyone out there can show me like one single other example of this, please send it my way because I'd love to see it. It's also noteworthy that these were 3 Black American women, because the experience or perception of polyamory within the Black community has certain idiosyncrasies that set it apart from some other polyamorous communities, especially those considered more mainstream. All that said, the first part of this discussion started out a little bit rocky for me, partly because there was this messaging that suggested that polyamory was some sort of new way of having relationships, which of course it's not. And my concern about the repeated implication of such is that in the world of online media, newness has a much shorter shelf life than other more traditional forms of media. Sure, the term polyamory is newer than some other terms related to ethical non-monogamy, but the relationship style has been around since, I don't know, pretty much forever. So there are already a lot of resources and a lot of voices that can help guide people through navigating ethically non-monogamous relationships. It's not this Wild West situation that a lot of people seem to imagine, which in turn can contribute to some people's negative views of polyamory, or some people's truly unethical behaviors within polyamorous dynamics. But that did not put me off of the entire episode, because overall, I thought it was pretty great. Not perfect, but pretty damn good. When Gammy was responding to some of the opening comments about Willow's polyamory, it was a really good illustration of something that often happens in discussions about ethical non-monogamy, and that's this almost like pressure or insistence that the priority for the conversation is to avoid making the monogamous person uncomfortable. She kept saying how confused she was, and there was a lot of defensiveness on her part in the beginning of her choice to be monogamous, but at the same time, I loved her candor about it, and about the fact that she'd been married 4 times, and also how the relatability of her stance helped to drive the conversation. Willow did seem to get a bit fired up at times, and there was a little bit of interrupting happening at first, but she's also 20 and having this conversation with her mom and her grandmother, and she's defending a lifestyle that is often very misunderstood. So that didn't really bother me. I just found it a little amusing. Jada said something about monogamy that I want to expand on just a little bit. She said that when you don't have this person or that person to turn to, and I quote, "When things aren't going well within your relationship, it makes you have to confront and look at things in a different manner." She also said that in polyamorous relationships, people need to be careful that they're not just dodging raindrops, which is a valid view, for sure. And I liked that comparison, the dodging raindrops one. But what that statement leaves out, for, an outside observer, is that when you engage in multiple romantic relationships, the same issues still apply, in that each relationship needs to be nurtured, and any problems that arise do need to be confronted. And I know she gets that, but that's also where some strict monogamists tend to switch off. Because there's this perception that people choose polyamory as a way to escape some problem in their primary relationship. And the people who do that don't end up better off. They're just creating more problems for themselves. And that's a really bad mindset to have when you first start having those discussions with your partner about opening up your relationship. One really good point that I think it was Jada brought up in the first segment was the fact that one of the key reasons for a lot of relationships not working is that they're often steeped in self-gratification. 100%. Whether that relationship is monogamous or non-monogamous, it's going to be really yucky if any of the people involved are acting out of some sort of hyper-focus on their own personal gain. Gammy and Jada then continued on to outline some of the benefits of monogamy, Gammy in particular, saying that it provides some degree of social order. It helps to set some boundaries. And I get how that idea appeals to a lot of people, but my argument, and part of what the ensuing discussion covered, is that it's the fact that a lot of these boundaries come from the top down and are forced upon people that I take issue with. Jada pointed out that a lot of people choose monogamy because they don't realize there's another choice. And that's something that comes up a lot when I reveal to someone that I'm polyamorous. By now a lot of people are more aware of, at least are aware that it's a thing that exists, but there's still some people who are like, wait, what? Wait, what? You can do that? It's like, yeah, you can, and I'm doing it. Willow started the segment by explaining that polyamory for her is about having the freedom to determine the relationship styles that work for her. And that's really what it's all about in a nutshell. Having choices and acting on those choices in an ethical manner with the knowledge and consent of everyone involved. That's super important, because if there isn't knowledge and consent, then you're just cheating, and that's not cool in any type of relationship. And there is no single correct way to have any kind of romantic relationship, and that, whether it's monogamous or non-monogamous, and people who practice polyamory approach it in very different ways. But the key to making these things work is communication. And around this point, Willow then expressed her feelings about marriage and the history of marriage and how problematic it is. And this is where the three women seem to find a bit of middle ground. Gammy was still confused at this point, but you could see her becoming increasingly open to this different perspective. I made a video a while back about what led me to starting that discussion with my husband, and how opening our marriage came from a really loving and supportive place.
I identify as polyamorous by orientation, but my husband and I started our journey into polyamory when a friend of mine came to visit from Melbourne.
So definitely check that out. All right, in segment 2, we meet Gabrielle Smith, who is very active in polyamory awareness. We also meet her boyfriend, Alex, and we also hear a little bit from Alex's wife. Right away, Gammy is confused again, but Gabrielle and the others have lots of answers and experiences to help clarify some things that are contributing to that confusion. They also present some of the common terms that are used in discussions around polyamory. They mention solo polyamory, which is when a person has multiple relationships, but they don't hold any of those relationships as being more important or above any of their other relationships. They talk about kitchen table polyamory, which is a dynamic in which there's a lot of open communication, or sometimes more of a family dynamic amongst a person, their partners, and their partners' partners, and so on. I love kitchen table polyamory, but there are a lot of polyamorous people who don't like that. They don't want to interact at all with their partner's partners. And I also date people who aren't into kitchen table polyamory, because it's really not a deal breaker for me. So you see, your dynamic with every partner or connection can be completely different, and that's okay. I loved when Gabrielle brought up the stories that she was reading when she was younger and this whole like love triangles thing, because it's such a common example of one of the ways in which monogamy, and sometimes toxic monogamy, has been so much more readily accepted by the wider public. It's an overused trope in literature, in movies, and it's just lazy. And I find it so frustrating now when I, for example, watch shows, even ones that I quite like, where the personality of the main character, usually a woman, is expressed through their need to choose between two partners who are usually rivals. So to those people out there who still think that non-monogamy or polyamory is just some easy way out of making a commitment, I say, have you watched Jane the Virgin, or Ugly Betty, or Twilight, or Dawson's Creek, or Bridget Jones, or Friends, or The Office, etc., etc., etc.? Because the overarching theme of those storylines is that that character will have an easier life if they just choose one person to commit to. It would be a far more interesting thing to see show creators explore the dynamics of non-monogamous relationships, ethically non-monogamous relationships, instead of this overused love triangle thing. It would be more of a challenge, yes, but if you can create hit shows about, vampires and superheroes and all sorts of things that do not actually exist, I think it would be great to take on the challenge of creating storylines that don't fall back on these overused subjects. Now, back to Alex. One question he got was, what happens when your partners are fighting? To which he responded that those situations challenge his mediation skills, which I thought was a great response, because there is a thing known as couples privilege, which is generally looked down upon in ethical non-monogamy. An example of couples privilege is when one person in a relationship decides that they don't want their partner dating a particular person for whatever reason, and they hand down a veto or an ultimatum, which is not some noble act because it's protecting the primary relationship. It's just a jerk move. That said, it's also a jerk move when you act with complete disregard for the feelings of anyone you're in a relationship with. Alex gave the example of having an agreement with his wife that if he's going to be out later than expected, that he lets her know about it beforehand, so he doesn't just show up late and upset her. And this is a much healthier way of acting than for the other person to say, no, you have to be home by this time just because I said so. that also touches upon the differences between rules and boundaries or agreements. But couples privilege and rules, boundaries, and agreements are whole other video topics. So subscribe to my channel so you don't miss those videos when I make them. In segment 3, we meet another Gabrielle, who is relatively new to polyamory and hadn't even told her family about it yet. Alex, then, a few minutes into the discussion, shared that he regretted not having come out about his polyamory to his family until they saw it on their local news. So they didn't have a chance to emotionally prepare for whatever backlash may have come from that. So I do wonder if that prompted Gabrielle in any way to tell her family about the situation before that episode aired. But it's not really my business what she ended up doing. I'm very open about my polyamory on my social media and with my friends and such, but I wasn't at first, not on social media. And the only reason I held back from speaking publicly about my polyamory, honestly, was because I was concerned about how my very religious Peruvian relatives might then respond to my mother about my choices. I knew that my parents would be very accepting of how I rolled, and I'm really thankful for that, but I didn't want to make a decision that would impact them without at least talking to them about it first. And when I did, I was assured that any backlash that might come from me speaking openly about my choices was something that they were fine dealing with, and that I might just be over-exaggerating the problem in my own mind. But I was still a little apprehensive about potentially putting them in that position. So the process of speaking out very openly on my social media didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually and with open communication, which might not be necessary or desirable in other people's situations, but it was in mine. Another issue that was brought up in this segment was the scourge of normalized jealousy and sneakiness that is too often accepted in monogamous relationships. Things like looking through your partner's phone or their Facebook messages, or just behaving in negative ways out of jealousy. When you have a trusting relationship of any kind, you should not have to invade your partner's privacy in order to make yourself feel more secure. Gemi, by this point, was a lot more open to the whole idea of polyamory, and she brought up something really important. She said that she would have to do so much work on herself to be in a polyamorous relationship, but also recognize that jealousy is just insecurity. And yeah, you need to be pretty secure within yourself and within your relationships to have enjoyable polyamorous experiences, but the work that you have to do to maintain that level of security may need to be revisited a number of times. Even by people who are, like, officially polyamorous. Jealousy can still happen, but it is not the measure of your devotion to someone. This brings up my favorite quotes from this whole episode, when Jada Pinkett-Smith says, "This is what makes people so angry when you even bring up this whole polyamory thing as an option. How the hell is that supposed to work? The whole reason why I'm in a relationship is so that you can make me feel a certain way, and you can validate me in a way that I won't do it for myself." You really hit the nail on the head there, Jada. That is an example of the kind of toxicity that has been way too accepted within monogamy, but is actually really damaging to relationships and to ourselves as individuals. In this segment, we also meet relationship coach Effie Blue, and I loved what she had to say, particularly about jealousy in this segment. It aligns with a lot of what I've worked on with some of my clients who have struggled with feelings of jealousy in various life contexts, and it's something I've also outlined in some talks that I've given as well. And that's the fact that jealousy can really educate you on what you see as lacking within yourself. It's not a partner's job to erase your insecurity. Anyway, she also makes a really important point in that polyamory does require having a large capacity to care for and nurture the people who you have relationships with. That means, of course, that polyamory is not for everyone. And also, speaking from personal experience, if you are not willing to do the work required to navigate ethically non-monogamous relationships, you may be better off just staying out of that arena altogether. Because you can cause a lot of hurt, not just to yourself, but to other people. People aren't characters in your play. I have been treated that way more than once, and it is not okay. It is not a pleasant experience. But also, getting back to what Effie talked about, it's not that polyamory is inherently better or more evolved than monogamy. So if you don't want to force yourself to do all that work because you would not find it enjoyable, or you wouldn't find it fulfilling, then you don't have to, and that's okay. You shouldn't feel guilty about that. As long as you are not acting selfishly or hurting anyone. Almost every one of my polyamorous friends has a story about how they started seeing someone, it got really serious, they fell in love, everything was la-di-da-di-da, and then it all fell apart because the person decided they couldn't do poly anymore. A lot of times it's because one of their partners changed their mind about the situation. Sometimes it's for other reasons. Either way, it's not great. Again, people are not just characters in your play. Just because you suddenly choose to have fewer people to disappoint, it doesn't automatically make you a person with integrity. And if polyamory is not right for you or your current relationship, that needs to be determined sooner rather than later, so that you don't bring other people into a toxic dynamic. It really helps to talk to a professional before you make that leap, and as issues come up. So hey, you know where to find me. The final person we meet in this episode is Michelle, who is Asian American, and she re-emphasized the point that a lot of the discussions about polyamory in the media are dominated by white voices. And she reminds us about the need to amplify voices of people like us, as people of color, who are already marginalized within a marginalized community. And of course, the love triangle trope came up again. Now, she didn't get a lot of airtime, but I am looking forward to diving into her story a little more. So, Michelle, if you're watching, I want to talk to you. I could go on about this for days, but instead I'll conclude by saying that this episode of Red Table Talk, and particularly the public response to it, has prompted me to really start planning for more videos about specific issues that come up in polyamorous relationships and ethical non-monogamy in general. So definitely keep checking in, let me know what your feelings about polyamory are, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and share it with someone else who can benefit from it. Subscribe to my channel and hit the notifications bell so you know exactly when I've uploaded a new video. You can also book a free life coaching session with me through my website, leslievcoaching.com, and we can work together online or right here in my studio. Follow me on my socials to keep up with what I'm doing, and please get in touch with any questions, comments, or video ideas you may have. I'm Leslie V, and I'll see you in the next video.